We're going to get started here in just a minute or two. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's 5:34. We have a quorum of 6 of 7 members. Director McKenzie is not here this evening. I'm open to a motion to adopt the agenda. Director Hartman adopts the agenda. Do we have a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Agenda is adopted. Going to move into number 4 on the agenda, new business, which is 2026 draft budget proposal, presentation, and discussion. And who better to kick it off than Executive Director Aaron Baker? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have an exciting evening for you. I will say this. I'm going to go under the assumption that you've looked through the numbers. You may have questions, you may not as well. So I don't want to belabor anything. So if we're going along and I'm going too quickly, say, hey, slow down. I've got a question about that. I want you to know our goal is for you to understand and feel comfortable with this document. Now, this is our first pass tonight at this document. So before we get into kind of the guts and feathers of it, there's some acknowledgments I really, truly need to make. First, I want to acknowledge Jennifer Chappelle Brock. This budget would not be possible without her. Candidly, the prior director did not make a lot of headway before her departure, and Jen picked up the pieces and put a budget together. And I will say, we gave her our ugly baby budgets, and she made them look pretty. That's a true story right there. She does a great job with it because she knows our organization very well. So I also want to thank the board, both past and current. By you providing with a direction and understanding of your priorities, it helps us build a better budget. I hate trying to guess. And so when we know, it helps us focus and implement your desires there. So thank you for that. We'll be testing some of those assumptions this evening as well. So looking for your feedback and direction there as well. And I also want to thank the staff. First, the directors. I joked that we gave Jen ugly babies, but these are the folks who provide the dishes that you're going to partake of tonight, this proverbial buffet. I appreciate them and their commitment to the community and willingness to work together for collaborative good and benefit of Anthem. They have been honest brokers through this process, willing to look at things and find ways to save on expenses and increase revenue. I also want to thank the finance staff. They're the unsung heroes of this process. Their accuracy ensures transparency and honesty in our financial processes. We can rely on them we can rely on this process because we can rely on them. So Susan's here and Jen's here, but there are 3 other team members, and I appreciate them as well. So, and then finally, each employee, I do genuinely believe that our employees understand the role that they play in the bigger picture. They strive to find ways to excel in their duties. So they are to be commended as well for their daily efforts to help the organization. So tonight, let's start it off this way. Last week, on about Tuesday of last week, we locked the budget. So we said, okay, no more changes, no more tinkering. But that doesn't mean that we didn't stop doing that. It's just we had to release a version for you for tonight since we had to do that on Thursday. So that was about Tuesday of last week. Since then, we've had updates, obviously. Those are internal. We haven't released those yet. We'll be talking about a few of them, but you'll really see those at the September board meeting. I will say, right now we show a deficit and we are closing that gap, and I am fully committed to at the October meeting to present you with a absolutely balanced budget, so there will be no gap there. That's one of our fundamentals on our pillars. And so, as I mentioned, this is an initial draft. We took into consideration strategic pillars, the priorities you've given us, and also just financial reality of the world around us right now. And tried to say, okay, let's try to make these two meet, converge at a good point, at the right point in space where we are doing our best and maintaining the standards that the community expects to preserve their property values, and going from there. So it also says test our assumptions. So past boards have given us direction regarding things. And so those are assumptions that we build into this year's budget as well, saying, okay, in the past we did this, and they told us to do that. So we're going to share those with you, and you're going to say, yes, we want to keep doing that, or no, we don't want to do that. We want to do something different. So we'll walk through each of those so that you can understand what some of those big pieces are. I will say we're not going to talk about individual pencils or T-shirts or something like that, but these are the big pieces that really move the dial. And then we want to receive some direction from you as a result of this conversation tonight, because this is a work in progress. So I will say, if any of you want to have an individual meeting about this and say, hey, walk me through this or help me understand that, we are more than happy to do that as staff, to sit down with you and spend the time to get you comfortable. Our goal is to make sure, like I said at the beginning, make sure when it comes to the October meeting that you feel comfortable with what you're voting on. I don't want you to feel any surprises on anything that you're looking at. I want you to understand. So with that. Chair Cotton reminded me, so this is our initial budget workshop. During the September board meeting, we will revisit this. This will be an agenda item in a much more abbreviated format because we will have done this workshop. And then we'll present to you what we've kind of gone back to the back cave and worked on and updated there based on your feedback. And then the October meeting, the October board meeting, will be the meeting where you will consider approval of the final budget. And it will be final budget for the operating, reserve, and enhancement. And there will be a special opportunity, Anthem Way Foundation meeting after that, where we'll approve the budget for the Anthem Way Foundation as well. That's a short meeting, so don't think that it's extra long, but that's a little bit about the process. If we run into huge issues, we can certainly add another one of these workshops along the way. My hope is that we're not way afield, that that's necessary, that we can just tighten things down to the point that it works for everyone. So, all right, strategic pillars, or I should back up on that. Any questions on that process? The Finance Committee also received a copy of this budget as well, just for the record, and we'll be discussing that at the September meeting with them as well. So, all right, let's walk through our pillars here. First is organizational leadership. This past year, we implemented a new performance management system, including changes to the review process and the timing of pay increases. Those changes have been reflected in this year's budget. So what we did in the past was we budgeted for personnel increases starting January 1. What we're doing this year is actually the review date. The review is January, February. The effective date is March. We've adjusted all those adjustments to start on March 1 instead of January 1. So we've cut out a little bit of slosh in there, if that makes sense. And then the board has emphasized employee training and professional development. We greatly appreciate it as a staff, and we have members who are taking advantage of that right now. They're participating in the tuition reimbursement program for some college classes and some other job-specific training. So by dedicating these resources to these areas, we continue to grow and support our existing employees with the goal of growing and retaining them. So I feel like we've built that into this budget, and appreciate your support in the past on that. Regional growth. The growth committee is examining these questions as part of this pillar. There haven't been any funds budgeted for anything related to this work at this point in time, Depending on what you ultimately decide at the end of the process, funds can be allocated at a future date. If you so desire, say, hey, I think we need to allocate something to do this, we can certainly come back and revisit that. On the operational excellence, manage community resources with care and pride. This is really the core of everything that we do here. So we try to do our very best to be good stewards of the resources that are available to us. We work with our partners to try to take advantage of every opportunity to work with them and build synergies there. We also try to use our technology that you've allowed us to have to better communicate with our residents and help them understand what we're trying to accomplish. A good example of that would be the fact that we're streaming tonight's meeting so that more people can see and participate in the budget process that way. So then finally on fiscal stewardship there, it breaks down into a couple of different areas. First, talking about the budget is maintain a break-even budget. So I started with that. That's one of the assumptions here that I want to test and make sure you're comfortable with, because some boards in the past have approved a deficit budget. But I've been told since I've been here, hey, we want to do a break-even budget. So that's what we're bringing to you. Another assumption here is that you want us to continue to use our asset management system that we've acquired, Limble, and to continue to invest in that and invest in employees building that out. So our next area is in our programming and events area, continue to provide excellent events and exceptional programming for the community. So we will have some of that. And that's one area you may notice on your budget. I'll just come out and say it's in the red right now. And it's down from last year. So we've gone through, that's one of those areas we've already done some work on. So we will continue to work on that and have updated numbers for you in September. And the work's already been done on the Anthem Veterans Memorial and setting a standard or an expectation there. And I greatly appreciate that. That's helped us as we plan this year's program to know, hey, this is the scope that the board wants to see on that. And then I will say finally on mitigating risk on the IT side, it has been great to work with AAM IT. They have made some significant improvements that have made us more secure than we were in the past, and they will continue to do those. So it has been a great investment on the security side there. So thank you very much. That's kind of a quick overview of the strategic pillars, but let me jump in. Any questions on that part before we jump into kind of the guts and feathers? All right, let's start with the big picture here. This is the 2025, what was adopted versus the proposed 2026. So revenues, as you can see, are up. They're about 2.8% over last year's budget. You can see that part. Expenses, they are slightly up as well, 3.38 over the prior year budget. Depreciation is up. Now, depreciation is not a real number. It's not like we pay depreciation, but it's an important number to understand that we have there in the budget at the bottom because it helps things balance out. Last year, you approved a surplus of $979 in the budget. It drove Jen bananas that it wasn't zero. It should just be a zero budget, and it should. Right now, in the proposed 2026 budget, we have a $16,000 deficit. Like I said, we've started on closing that, and we'll close that. No questions asked. Transfer from enhancement to operating. This is another assumption that we've made in the past. So what we've got right here is last year the board approved $495,000, and that was based on an adjustment for operating costs that made up the original transfer. So we went back and looked and said, okay, the original transfer that was occurring was $400,000. Let's go back and look at those same costs and see what they're costing us in 2025, and that was the updated number last year. We were proposing an increase, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, to 513. That increase percentage is based on the proposed assessment increase. So we had to benchmark it to something, and that's what we benchmarked it to. Reserve contribution, that increases every year. It's from $2.4 to $2.6 million in reserve contribution. That $190,000 increase, that's about 7%. That's built into the reserve contribution schedule that the board adopted several years ago. As a point of interest, CPI last year was 3%. That's from July to June. And for this year, that is 2.7%. So as we looked at all these, and we'll walk through the individual expenses, but I don't want to try to bury the lead, so I'll just tell you. Last year, we had an assessment increase of $3.58 or 4%. As we looked at things and tightened things down, it's $3.12 per month is what we're proposing at 3.75. And I'll go out on a little bit of a limb and say I think we can do better than that based on some of the work we're doing right now. So I think at the September meeting, you'll see a number. I'm not going to tell you how much lower, but it will be lower. It might be $3.11, but our goal is to make that assessment increase as low as possible. We don't want to do that, but there are also increases in expenses that we have to be honest about. And so we'll dive into those here in just a second.
Director Patterson, did you have a question for Mr. Baker?
Well, he said he was going to dive into things. Of course, I have questions about the
Enhancement contribution?
Yeah, because I've never been completely comfortable with the numbers that you come up with and my concept of what that is covering. Will you be going into that deeper? Like what makes up that 513,000?
Can I talk about that when we go through that slide?
Yeah, that's
okay. Yep.
I was patient.
Okay, I'll make sure I address that when I talk about that slide.
Yeah, I just want to say though, if you have any questions in the meantime, obviously if they come up, please ask or flag, and then we'll interrupt. And do that. Thank you.
All right, kind of big picture here. On the revenue side, we're up $343,000 over the 2025 budget. There is the assessment increase, as we talked about. That translates into $377,000 or 3.75%. Some of the big areas in the revenue side, lien collections. We don't currently do liens, but because of some changes in state law, we're going to have to start doing liens as a form of collection, and that's going to be us doing them, not CHDB. The state law changed to state that we can't collect, we can't take legal action until it's been 18 months or $10,000 in past due assessments. So that puts a really long leash out there. And then we can't collect on legal fees unless there's a judgment. So if we go through the process and we have engaged the attorneys with this person, and then they ultimately say, hey, before we go to court, I'll pay, and let's say we racked up $3,000 worth of bills, we just have to eat those. So we're trying to do more and use some alternative tools like liens that we can do through our staff to increase our collection rates. Legal collections are down 30,000 because of that change I was just talking about. So it's still a net increase of 30,000, but it's going to be tough slogging on the lien side. Enhancement fund contribution to operating. So that amount is an increase of 18,562. And the assessment, like I said, is benchmarked there according to the assessment increase. I do have a specific slide about this though. So, and then on the expense side, we're up 3.38% or 441,500. So what makes that up? What is that? I think it's important to see operating expenses. They are up 3.09%. So that's not payroll and benefits. That's just, I call them services and supplies, operating expenses, whatever you want to call them. That's everything below that portion. And that's a pretty modest increase overall, given what's happening in the current economy and with some of our contracts, which will, so contraction professional increases are almost $150,000. Our reserve contribution is $190,000. And we do have personnel costs, an increase of 3.2% as we work with our employees. Now, those are merit. Those are not guaranteed, but that's what the pool would be for merit increases there. Any questions?
Excuse me, Treasurer, would you speak into the microphone? Thank you.
And again, you can address this later if you I'm still not understanding the philosophy of the borrowing from the enhancement fund for the operating budget.
Sure. So I can speak, this practice started before I arrived here, but I think now is as good a time as any to talk about the philosophical approach that was taken. So I believe it was in the 22 budget, is that Jen, correct? And the 22 budget was the first year that they approved it, October of 21 before I got here. But I believe the initial thought was we continue to build these amenities, and so we want to take some of the funds that are being contributed to build amenities to pay for the operating of said amenities. So we went through and we said, okay, skate and ride park's a good example. That would be one. Pickleball courts would be another one. We took the data from there for maintenance and labor. We put it in the worksheet and it generated a number that came out the bottom. We said, okay, we believe it costs, and I think that year was 400,000. I could be mistaken. Was it 400, Jen? Okay, it was 400. Okay. So this $400,000, we will supplement the operating fund so that the operating costs created by these amenities are being paid by the enhancement. So the funding mechanism to create will pay to maintain. That's legal. Now, philosophically, certainly people have different perspectives on that of whether or not that's wise or not. And like I said, this is one of the assumptions we want to test with you tonight, because if you say, hey, because last year we adjusted that benchmark because it was 400. Then we went back and said, okay, the prior assumptions you made on all this, it's been a few years since we've updated it. So we went back through and Rob Samuelson updated them and said, okay, we're now at 495 is really what, based on the prior assumptions, where we're at now. And so if we want to continue to do that, the question is, do we annually increase it, benchmarked on the assessment increase, if we're going to view that as an outside revenue stream? Or do we say we're going to cap it and not increase it until another couple of years when we come back and review it? Or do we decrease the contribution? Because at that point, I will be perfectly frank, we're starting to get to the point where we're over the 50% mark of contribution from the enhancement into operating. Now, some past board members have argued that's a good throttling mechanism to keep us from continuing to build more and more amenities and adding to the operating expenses. They say, hey, I think that's good because it kind of throttles you back on what you want to build and add as a general burden to the populace. And some have said, no, I don't think that that's the appropriate way to do that. That should be for building projects, kind of one-time expenses versus operating. So like I said, the contribution would go up this year to, what's that number? I just had it.
513.
513, thank you. Go up to 513, and we're projecting $888,000. So that gives you a sense of kind of where that would be.
I'll jump in real quick.
Is now the time we're talking about it? Or
Sure, let's do it.
Yeah, let me just say something real quick, Barb. So just kind of historically, like Director Baker said, is that it was a choice that we either continue to increase the dues to pay for amenities, or we pull from the enhancement fund, which legally was written that we could to cover the cost of those. So we ended up making a choice to go with that. I am curious, however, has it ever been calculated that if we did not want to touch the enhancement fund and we just wanted to allow the enhancement fund to be untouched by any costs, like what that would translate into for a fee increase?
We can certainly reverse engineer that. The number sticks in my head as $135,000 equals equals a buck.
Okay.
That's kind of the back of my head. That's that number. So if you said, hey, we want to go from 513 down to 200, we would just do the subtraction and
$5 or something.
yeah, whatever that translates out to be, that's what we could do.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. Sorry, and then
Yeah,
Dr. Patterson.
so we're going to talk about it now. I have several questions. One is, do you include in here the income that is, let's say you have, and I will use pickleball, It produces income, and the best that I can know, it makes more income than it is to maintain it. So are you including in the income from each of the amenities? I guess my first question is, what amenities are included in this? Can you label them?
I'm gonna have to get you the worksheet. I don't want to
Okay.
misspeak which ones are in there and which ones aren't for sure, but I can get the
Okay.
worksheet out. What we did this year is I went off of Rob's number from last year, the updated amount of 495, and then I simply applied the 3.75
Okay.
adjustment to that, because I was trying to benchmark it off of something, so that we could just move forward with kind of a consistent pattern if we were to choose to go forward.
Right, well, I don't think that they've ever included the income that each one of these might produce.
Okay, I
So
can
it's
check.
only the expenses. I did sit down with, a couple years ago, and it looked like some of the amenities, well, I get the skate park is expensive. So I'm looking for the worksheet to say skate park costs us X.
We have, that's what the spreadsheet does do.
Okay.
It does. And so I'm
Then
happy to dig that
maybe
back out.
yeah, and what I can do is just come and meet with you
Sure.
separately on it rather than take everybody's time.
I'd be happy to send it out to the group so everyone can see some of those assumptions, so you understand, okay, this is where, these are the amenities involved, these are the assumptions we're making. I will say, I can't speak to the details right now, unfortunately. I wish I would have brought that with me, but I
Yeah,
didn't.
that's okay, but you do have it?
Yes,
and
we do. We have it for last year for that
we have-
495.
And would you be the appropriate person for me to chat with about it?
Yep, between Jen and me, we'll get it figured out.
So just, just to be clear, so the 513,000 that you're proposing to transfer, you have backup data that relates to expenses related to one-time amenities that have been built.
Correct.
That's where that number came from with an adjustment of the 3.75%,
Correct.
which is just the cover-ups.
Correct.
That's it.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'm glad we're having this discussion, because like I said, these are the kinds of questions we want to make sure that we're assuming the right thing on.
That's great. Is there any other questions from board
I think
members?
the only other comment
Yeah.
is that as we, see, I never really understood the 400,000 either. And not that I didn't understand it, but maybe I didn't agree with it. So the original, what he's basing this on is just upping it, 400,000, then 495, and then now we have an increase because it's 3.75 of that. It's kind of like a payroll, you know, we're assuming that that we're going to increase it every year, that all of those enhancements actually have increased. One, I'm not convinced of that. So, okay, I'll just handle it later. And then by the September meeting, I'll have more maybe questions that I can bring forth to everyone.
Certainly. Yeah, that would be a great time to discuss those, because we'll make sure you get them before then.
So I think historically, we've had a conversation where it was like a teeter-totter, where we wanted to avoid the overdraw from the enhancement fund to make sure that we're minimizing the fee increase for dues. And so sometimes I think past board members' concern was that it would be this teeter-totter where we could say, well, we're going to keep the fee fund, the fee increase down by upping the how much we contribute, the contributions out of the enhancement fund. So that has been a conversation that board members are like, look, at one point in time, are we going to, as an organization, essentially deplete the income of the enhancement fund? And that is obviously a concern of yours, which is a very valid one, right? The question is at what point do we say, you know, where you look at how much of a fee increase, right? So they're looking at a 4%. I believe the residents have to vote for anything more than a 20% increase, right?
It is 20%. I don't know if it's a vote or if there's some other special action, but I remember last year talking to Jonathan, you trip a wire at 20%.
Yeah.
I just have one other thing and a
please.
little history. Way back when, I think when I was first working with the enhancement group, not when I was on the board, but there was a state law that said those funds had to be used not for operating, and then the state legislature changed that. That's when we started, and I will say this in quotes, dipping into it for operating. Prior to that, so there's some of us who still have the mindset that it should go for that and not be a fallback position, because it feels like it's just getting used because we only want to increase our dues by $3. Well, maybe we need to, I just want it to be real, that's all. That's the
And
intention.
if there's a general interest in that conversation, we could put together a, maybe like, instead of like weaning the baby off all at once, if there's an interest, we could build a program. I mean, that's, I think, conversation for September, where we could say, okay, we're gonna step this down over 3 or 4 years, if there's interest to do that. That, again, this is the kind of stuff we're just trying to test and verify this evening. So if you say, hey, let's build a program where in 5 years we're off of it, we can do that too. So.
So this is a great time to be having this, so I'm glad we're actually dialoguing about this. But so if you think about philosophically, the enhancement fund, we're out of land, right? So we have no more land to be able to build any kind of new amenities. Anything that we build at this point would be on top of something else, such as those additional pickleball courts. However, at one point in time, the enhancement fund will not be as necessary to contribute a significant amount of money, because those large capital projects, like a dog park, like a skate park expansion or things like that, won't really be on the table. So one could say, and I'm not saying necessarily this is the viewpoint that I'm going for, but that the more we pull from that enhancement fund dollar, that everything is going to kind of come to a T. And then at one point in time, just something to think about, that we've built so many things, and those things have a cost associated with maintenance and operation. And at one point in time, the full utilization of that fund could potentially just balance itself out, and then we just use a minimal amount for any kind of like upgrades.
I think that's what the two schools of thought that I've heard through time, basically. You know, we're talking about the two thought processes there. So if there's something specific besides the worksheet that you would like me to develop or bring forward for the September meeting, please let me know. So as we're going through tonight, say, oh yeah, hey, could we get that for the enhancement? Because we're going to talk about it a little bit more later.
Excellent. Director Barbie has a question.
Thinking about the people that might be watching this either tonight or another time. And I think that it would be best if you explained where money comes from that goes into the enhancement fund.
Oh, thank you.
And then also our operating fund, like
Sure.
the difference. How does money get into one and the other?
Excellent point. Thank you. I'm happy to do that right now. On the operating side, our operating fund is assessments and program revenue. Those are the largest revenue streams there. We have some leases and some other things like that, but those are minimal compared to the assessments that come in and fund the majority of it. For the reserve is actually pulled out of those assessments that are collected. So everything that comes in, then we take an amount, and we say, okay, we're going to transfer over X amount into the reserve to set aside to pay for future repairs that we know are going to come to large things. So that's how the reserve is funded. The enhancement fund is funded through a 1/4% of the sale of every property in Anthem. I will say this year we updated it. It used to be that commercial had a different schedule. This year was updated, and so now when commercial property is transferred, it also pays a 1/4% there too. So that is the funding source for the enhancement fund. So it's not direct to a resident on their monthly bill. It's as people are buying and selling their home. And usually the parties will talk about who pays for it, if it's the buyer or the seller. Those private parties can work that out. So is that sufficient? Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, Director Baker, go ahead.
Okay, next. All right, let's talk about general revenue. Just in general, excuse me, I'm gonna flip my tabs here. All right. So total revenue after transfers is up 343,000 or 2.88% for next year. So, and what I say is after transfers, that's after transfers to reserve and transfers from enhancement. So that's kind of that net number right there. Total assessments, we talked about that, an increase of 3.72%. Their event revenues are down 6.11% as of when this was done. We've gone back through and we've tightened that number up, and I feel like we're gonna have a better number for you at the next meeting where that will be in the black, not in the red. Please.
I have a question. Does that mean that next year we're doing 12,000 less?
Correct. So
What are we giving up?
that's why I said we'll have an updated number for you.
Oh,
So
because
this-
maybe we aren't giving up anything.
Correct, correct. So this is on the revenue side. I've worked with Mr. Dinkowski, and we've refined that a little bit. There were some things, I will say this on the event side, there's some revenue that we gave up, but we also gave up some associated expenses with that. So it was fine. It was the 4th of July bounce house water slide things. So we don't get the revenue from it. It's about $2,500. But we don't also have the expense of the water tank and the staffing and all that associated with it. So, but that number's improved. So if you notice in the memo, it said we're working on that one. That's true. Program revenue's the same way. It came in $15,000 less in the 2026 budget. We've been working with Mr. Newell on that, and that number is up. That's going to be an increase there as well. So watch for that updated number. Rental revenue is up almost 10%. We have 4 signed tenants upstairs, I'm happy to report. We have a 5th considering it. I don't know if he's going to ultimately decide to do it or not, but that will help significantly. And that is not planning at 100% or even 80% occupancy. I think that's a 50% occupancy upstairs. So that'll be a real positive for us. We are not looking at increasing the room rental rates in this building. I know we did that last year, and there was a lot of feedback about that. So I don't think it's necessary this year to do that, but in future years, we'll obviously look at that again because that was part of the amenities committee recommendations. Then just in miscellaneous revenue, we're up about $7,500. Interest income, we're up 8% on that. I do want to give my compliments to Rob Samuelson, who is not watching tonight. But his investment strategy has done wonders for us in helping us track. It's not that the investments themselves are just wildly better, but it's a greater accountability tool, and we're better able to measure our success there. So I want to thank him for his efforts there in sorting through that and helping us get to a better understanding and a better performance there. That's general revenue. Any questions on general revenue? All right, on reserve contributions, let's talk about this. This is, I would consider this revenue to the reserve. It's an expense to the operating budget, but you can see how every year we're going up by 7%. This is based on the schedule that the 2023 reserve study schedule that the board approved. And candidly, as a staff, we always recommend making the full recommended contribution so that we are staying current on our reserve demands. Enhancement fund revenues, again, we're projecting, or we budgeted, $862,000. Next year, we're budgeting $888,000. That is an increase of $25,000. So that would be an increase of proposed operating fund contribution increase of $18,562. The net result of $7,000 in the enhancement there. So, all right, let's talk about expenses. This kind of is the breakdown by area so that you can see them. Personnel costs, again, up $181,000, 3.2%. I really want to compliment Jen on this. She has gone through and made sure that we are very clean on this. Even down to, like I said, the increase being in March, not in January. So it is very dialed in. Repairs and maintenance, this is Mike's budget. He has a decrease of $55,000, and we'll go into that a little bit. He's just trimming some little areas, and you'll see those, not big, but he has a large budget, and so just little nips and tucks help right there. So appreciate his efforts in that area. Expenses in programs is up 85. Again, we're working on that, and that number will actually come down a little bit. Community involvement, an increase of $200. We can spend a lot of time talking about that $200 if you want. Utilities, we are increasing 25,000. I'm sorry, I left a little bit in there of projected. Excuse me, that's my mistake on that. We did hear that APS may be considering a rate increase, but from what we understand, that will be effective January 2027. So we didn't budget for that this year, but know that that's coming. So financial, in the finance department, a budget increase of 29,000. Professional services there, 25,000. Contract services, 116. Human resources, 3. General administration, 18. And events, 33. Are there any of those that you would like to walk through on those? They're in the memo that we wrote, and I'm happy to answer questions on any of them. Like I said, I kind of working under the assumption that you read through it and said, oh yeah, that looks good, and nope, I have a question about that.
The one I would like to talk about is utilities.
Okay.
That's a pretty big discrepancy there over with the increase, and that's not something obviously we can control. We don't set utility rates, but I'm seeing a pretty big gap here of,
So that versus projected increase of $5,000 is actually a relic that shouldn't have been in there. That was from my presentation from last year.
so can you better explain to me what that should say then?
Versus projected, I don't have the projected number in front of me right now, so I can get you that number.
Okay.
But that was a typo from last year. I apologize. That's my mistake.
That's okay. Let's just quickly consider that if there is any kind of gross difference there, going back to considering increasing rates on things. Part of when I was on the amenities committee with Barb, one of the things I was really adamant about is let's recover our costs. So if we need to reanalyze what it's costing us for that room over there for somebody to sit in it for an hour, then we need to have an employee figure out what it costs and adjust our rates so we can at least break even, because if that's costing us money, we need to figure
Okay.
that out.
We'll make sure, let me make a note here to review.
Did you have any other questions on that? Is there any other questions from the board on this specific expenses slide? I'll ask a question and then Barb.
Sorry, I do have a question.
Yeah, I'll give you a second here. Let me go over kind of the notes that I have here. I have these in percentages. So I have the community center is a 5 to 7% increase.
Let me flip to my documents here. I work better if I have the specific numbers.
So I noticed that fields and turf and irrigation and turf were drivers on a 3 to 4% increase for our field budget. I was under the assumption that was potentially a DLC contract.
So you're talking repairs and maintenance, and you're saying it's 30, which one do you have the budget line that you're looking at?
I don't know. I just wrote down here so I could do a quick reference, but it was regarding fields.
Okay.
It was saying that we're increasing the costs by 3 to 4% is what I have on there. Irrigation and turf were drivers that were listed. And I just wanted to know exactly what we're paying for out of operation in the park, and then what is actually in the contract that we have with DLC.
Okay.
And then how those two are different.
Okay, I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one.
Sure.
Because I can't find that right now. I don't turn that fast.
Sure. So the other question I have is, I would be curious to see, and it's not listed on here, but which cost centers, divisions hit the cap for their operating budget? And then if they did, when did that cap hit occur within the year?
Okay, so you're saying how close to being on budget are they? Is that what you're saying?
It's when did they hit their budget? At what point in the year did they spend their budget?
So say,
did
for
they spend
example,
it
their
at
budget's
month
$1 million.
6, month 9? That's a good question.
Did they hit their budget cap? Like, did they spend all of their budget by August 1st when it should last them throughout the year? I'm curious if we measure that because I feel like just being good stewards of the community, we're not staff, but a great way to prevent overinflated increases is to potentially look at how we're spending money in each division with regard to, say, for example, the community center, which I use every day. We're looking at a pretty significant increase in that. So I'm curious, at what point did we hit the budget cap for the operating budget for, like, say, for the example of the community center or all these cost centers? When do we hit it? Like, was it September 1st that they had capped out, or are there some cost centers that still say, hey, I've still got budget allocated for my P&L that I'm able to use? Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
So let me answer it a couple of different ways, and then Jen can jump in if I'm not answering it as completely as helpful. So every month we run variance reports. So the way we budget, we don't do let's say the community center has a budget of $1,200. We don't say it's $100 every month that's your budget. We know there's seasonality to that budget. So we program both our revenue and our expenses on a monthly basis. So we might say, hey, January and February are $50. February and March are $75. And then during the summer, it's even more. It's $150 a month until we get to that $1,200. So as we look through the variance reports, we can see where people are according to the budget, both on the revenue and expense side, the timing of it. So right now, I will say overall as an organization, right now, we are approximately $300,000 better than the current budget. So bottom line, out of our $12 million budget, we're about $300,000. Now, there are some key expenses that haven't hit yet. So we're closer in reality to about $100,000 better than budget right now overall. But there is that ability to see down to the department level, like even down to the expense line. So let's say we budgeted $500 for pencils, $200 for widgets, $300 for this, $500 for personnel. We're able to see all that and see where people are tracking, and people are tracking.
Sure, and that's fine. So I guess what I'm looking for in if it requires some crunching, and this is based off of, I don't know if I talked to you, Scott, or if I was talking to you, Aaron, regarding like upholstery on the workout equipment. And I said, a lot of people are coming up to me about the upholstery.
Right.
You said, we have depleted our operating budget for the year.
Okay.
We have no more operating budget left to be able to replace that until the new year kicks in. Now, if that's incorrect, then whatever, but I would be curious to see, when was the operating budget maxed out for that specific cost center?
Okay, and we can gain that because when we budgeted it, we said, and I don't know if it's specific on upholstery, but we usually put things like, okay, we usually do that in March, or we'll do that in July. We don't do like I said, we generally don't do a divide by 12 method. It's usually a month. So I can get, if you want specifically on that upholstery, I can get you that one specifically.
I'm not talking, I'm just giving you the example of what was the
Okay.
genesis of coming up with this thought. So I'd be curious to see, when we're talking about increasing the dues to the community by a certain percentage, it's because we need to be able to have more money to pay for things. And at one point in time, we hit an operating budget cap. We say,
Gotcha.
we have no more money to do something. I'm curious when it was hit. That's all. And in
Okay.
which cost centers are exceeding or getting to the point where they have no more money to spend
Okay,
prior to the end of the year when that resets.
okay. I think
If you want,
we can, no. I was about to say, I think Jen, we can run a variance report that will give us that.
Okay.
Okay, I'm getting the nod. Okay. Microphone, Scott. Sorry, people in TV land.
So the one you're referencing would be fitness maintenance, and it's not that we like ran out of money. It's how Aaron explained it. We have certain money for certain things. So if we're saying, hey, upholstery is this number, but general maintenance or repairs, so there's still money in that budget. What we would have to do is decide, are we gonna fix that Stairmaster, or are we gonna repair the upholstery? There's still money in there. There's really nothing between Mike and I where we would ever blow anything at 6 months or 8 months. We would do everything on a 12-month schedule. If we did it in 6 months, we would expect to be fired. That shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
So this is just about, like in this particular case, there's money in that line. It's just what was it allocated for, and do we want to move it and have that talk?
Sure. So you're aware of this because I forward emails occasionally to like Aaron or you and things like that, whether there's a resident who's concerned about something. And sometimes I don't, but sometimes it's just they're concerned about how we utilize those funds. So for example, I got a multi-tiered email not too long ago about the upholstery. And so that was kind of what brought it up is what do I say? Do I say there's no more money in the pot? Do I say we'll get to it eventually? Kind of those are the questions. And we're talking about budget. We're talking about raising dues. And so people are saying, well, you're raising dues. Is there no more money to be able to take care of some of those types of things? So for me, it helps me understand the budget, our expenses, but also helps me understand how do I respond in kind to any of those kinds of requests.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for that clarification. I think Jen has a question or comment.
I just wanted to share, to back up just to your question about the landscaping in the fields. I'm not exactly sure. The only thing I see in fields, for me, sorry, pardon me, I just had it. So fields that I see is actually flat, but you mentioned irrigation. So depending which particular lines you were looking at, I'm showing that landscaping, which is tree plant seed plus any, what we call other, those are actually increasing 7.6%. And our irrigation is actually going down by 4%, which I'm sure I know Mike could speak better to that, but that's probably cutting back on some of the poly to PVC project and such.
I'm looking through it's pulling up right here. So if you go down, and I apologize, I should have printed this out and then marked it, but I had written the note here in my book to reference, and these are so small. 5310-14 is a sprinklers irrigation backflow.
Yes, so that's the one right now. Currently, we're budgeting a 4% decrease actually for 26.
You are, okay. I had something else where it was showing a increase, but I'll have to get that back. I needed to mark it.
And we can certainly give that to you.
So I guess my question was I was curious as the difference between what we're giving to DLC and kind of how they cover turf, and how much of DLC is covering that cost from our maintenance costs, and then how much is coming out of our operating budget.
Excuse me. DLC does not break down their costs by location, but it's more just a general contract to perform all the scope of services on the ACC. So we've gotten a slight increase from DLC for their operating for 2026, a budget increase, as it were, for them. However, some of the investments that we've made by doing the poly to PVC and some of the other things, we are saving the water expenses that we would normally have pushed out into the dirt by fixing some of these things. So we're lowering our costs, and that's why I made some of the adjustments for the 531014. And this goes across the board. Same with granite, some of those things we had to make up for deferred maintenance, and so we had some really, really high budgets, and we did some big projects, and you see huge maps of all these granite areas we've done. Well, this year, since we had the increase to DLC and some other increases through the contracts and things, I kind of made the decision that, hey, let's save a little bit of money for Anthem so we don't spike our budget. We'll pull back on some of the deferred maintenance slightly and keep a little bit of that momentum going so that we don't cause a huge increase in the assessments. So this is a conscious decision on my part. We'll still do the deferred maintenance, but just not quite as much.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions on specific categories? Okay. Paseo. So they have an individual benefited assessment for them. We are proposing an annual increase of $5,910 or $3.08 a month. The assessment breaks down really into two parts for them. They're like their own mini community in there. The first part is the operating portion of the assessment, proposing a 4% increase of $2.45. This is largely due to the contractual increases that are in there and the maintenance costs that are there as well. For years, the ACC floated all of those increases and absorbed them. And only in the past 2 years have we started to transfer those to them so that they pay directly. So if there was an increase in DLC, there's an increase in their maintenance costs, those were assigned to Paseo. So that's what's making up that proposed operating assessment increase there. And the reserve contribution based on their reserve study, because they have their own reserve study, the schedule recommends a 7% or 60 cents a month based on the 2023 reserve study there. So pretty straightforward for them, but that's because, like I said, they have their own benefit assessments that are there for their community. So any questions on that? All right, capital expenditure. We have one that we included in the memo, and it doesn't even necessarily need to be a capital expenditure, but I figured it was the best place to have this conversation. So that's why I put it here. So on softball field 1, there's a scoreboard. Right now it has a faded anthem sticker on it. You may have seen it, you may have not. We're considering, do we reinstall a scoreboard out there, just like we did down on Little League, or do we do something different there? The scoreboard runs approximately $19,000 installed. There are some potential funding sources for that. One would be CapEx. Now, when I say CapEx, really that just says, should we take some assessment and apply it towards this? FMP, do we consider this a future FMP project, that conversion? Or do we just say, hey, we had a scoreboard there previously, we need to put the scoreboard back, and we just use reserve funds in order to do that? So looking for a little bit of direction right here on this one, because I know in the past, I think this was a topic that was discussed at this level. I wasn't here when it was discussed, but I didn't want to make any assumptions here on this one if there's some institutional knowledge or feelings on this one. So this is, again, a point where we're looking for some direction.
I think this would be an easy sponsorship deal. I think this would be something we should go to. Remax is an example, or something like that in Anthem, who has been here for a long time, and offer some type of, much like a State Farm Stadium or something like that, where they get the naming rights on it for X amount of time when they get into it. And I think that could be a pretty,
Okay.
if it doesn't cover the whole thing, it could cover a good portion of it.
I will say, I believe Director Barbie was not here when we actually took up the topic of whether or not we would offer sponsorship on those fields and allow it. It was requested by High Desert Little League, and then the board turned that down, that they did not at the time want to offer that.
How long ago was that? And
I think it was right before you started, to be honest
okay.
with you. Was it?
And then was that only one proposal, or did we hear from multiple people? Was it just that we didn't like what they proposed to us, or just the idea of sponsorship?
It was regarding them wanting to be able to hang like a banner on the external gate of the park, if I'm remembering correctly. And we said no to the proposition because it opened the door to whoever wanting to put the sign on the gate. So I don't know if this could fall under something different or if it would be up for discussion, but it was primarily because we did not want to essentially clutter the ballpark or fields with signage across the entire thing.
I think it was because we were it would be setting a precedent for advertising in the park, and that the board decided that we did not want to begin advertising, because then if High Desert Little League got to do it, would Phoenix Rising be able to hang a banner near the soccer fields? And would somebody else, Dave, go ahead.
Just a comment, since I wasn't in those original discussions, I tend to, and this may be controversial, but I tend to agree with Director Barbie. There's a difference between someone coming to you with a proposal for a banner sign versus we go to the community and say, we're going to redo the scoreboard and we're offering certain sponsorships with these guidelines in terms of what the signage will look like. That's a whole different thing, where we get to control what it's going to look like and we get to get some revenue to pay for the cost. Yeah, so Remax, either you get one sponsor and it's a Remax, or you get 10 sponsors that's around the sign. Done everywhere.
I think this would be a great topic for a future business committee to talk about. Just throwing it out there that maybe this is something that they could discuss. We know, for those of us that watch or follow professional sports, especially baseball, that is pretty typical. I know it's might not what we want here in Anthem, but sponsorship is everywhere. And if it is something we could sell yearly or get something on a board and we're covering our costs, they're buying the sign, they're paying us to hang it, they're paying us for that space for the year, for the season. It comes down, they have to pay for it. That's why I think it'd be great for the business group to look at that moving forward.
There is a new board every year, and that is obviously something that can be up for discussion if you had someone to second. They did have Barb, I'll get you in a second. They did have the Diamondbacks came and they paid for, what was it they paid for the board there?
They paid for the board and made $50,000. Am I remembering that number correctly? So they basically gave us a $70,000 contribution. And so the scoreboard out there in Little League does say yeah, Ken Kendricks Field. Yep.
Right, and then they named it Ken Kendricks Field. So Barb, go ahead.
That was all I was going to say.
You are, okay.
Yeah, Aaron and I were there, and it was a nice presentation. But we do have some sponsorship. I think the question is, how much do we want? And do we want banners or do we just want scoreboard? So I think that's a good question for future.
Again, that's one of those things that falls into the philosophical conversation. I think I did vote in favor of allowing them to do that, but I do understand the mindset of other board members at the time who said, if you let them do it, now Phoenix Rising is going to come and these other groups are going to come, and now we're going to have ads all over the park, and that doesn't necessarily fall within the Anthem design guideline purview. Yeah, Dave.
So I think one of the philosophies of the amenities committee way back when, and Barb and Mark will remember this well, and you were a key instigator, Director Barbie, in making sure that where we can, we're covering our costs for the expenses, and where we can find and pursue additional revenues, we should do that within the context of not turning ourselves into, a graffiti town. So I just want to throw out at least my philosophy, something to be discussed in the future, is that where we can see additional revenues through signage, through sponsorships that are appropriate within the appropriate guidelines, we should pursue those. Where we can reduce expenses and cover our costs for whatever the particular amenity event is, we should always pursue that. That sounds a little highfalutin, but I just wanted to lay that out as a general philosophy.
Yeah, thank you for that point, Director Patterson.
And my first impression was this is exactly a FMP project, and this is why we don't want to spend all of our money. Yeah, maybe we don't have enough land to create a new, but there's plenty of places that we can enhance, which is what the name depicts what it is. This would be a perfect example if we don't decide something else, but that's all I have to say.
I would agree with that also.
Can I share the price?
Yeah.
Okay, so Director Baker had given me a $2,200 price tag for replacing the sticker, the Anthem sticker that's
Correct.
burnt out currently by Ultraviolet.
Yeah, it's faded. Yep.
I did look into something a little bit more, that there is like a coating that you can put on there. That's just like very UV restrictant.
Mhm.
But those even have times. And then you also said a cost of a new scoreboard was $19,000.
Correct.
So just for the board to understand, $2,200 for a new sticker, 19,000 for a new scoreboard. But that is a great opportunity for an enhancement fund project.
So let me ask this, if you would like us to bring that back for a future agenda item, let's say we carve it and say, hey, for this scoreboard, do you want us to seek out sponsorships? Because we actively seek out sponsorships for our events and do that aggressively. If you want us to put something on the agenda to say, hey, in this one specific instance, we agree right now, we don't need to tackle the whole thing, but we will tackle the scoreboard. If you want me to do that, we can do that. I'm seeing heads nodding.
Sounds like that's an affirmative.
Okay.
I'm saying yes to what you're saying, but I also want if this business committee comes to fruition, I think it is something that they should look into using that space to generate revenue.
Okay.
Moving forward.
We'll get going on the scoreboard piece, at least right now. That's a piece we can do right away. Excuse me. Okay, that's the one capital expenditure. All right, reserve fund. So this is kind of like our savings. That's why I have a piggy bank right there. It's based off of the reserve study that's conducted every 5 to 6 years. As we go through each item on the reserve study, and we try to make it as comprehensive as we can, but we always continue to discover new things that are not listed on there. But we work as a team on that, but we have a monthly meeting. In fact, we had it on Monday, where we review each item on the list. We say, hey, does it need to be replaced, repaired, refurbished? What needs to go on with that item? Some items we delay. We say, hey, not this year, not 2 years. It's in great condition. We don't need to do anything about it. And some items we say, ooh, you know what? That's supposed to be replaced or supposed to be looked at in 2 years, but it needs to be replaced right now. So there's been this narrative before in the past that, oh, because it's on the reserve list, it gets replaced. That's just not true. That's not how we operate today. So we examine each and every item. Often there's a report generated, and we document its current condition, and we say yes or no, or can we refurbish? Mike's done a great job. A good example on the refurbish is we had a John Deere ProGator that cycled out of service. It was to be replaced, and it was time for it to be replaced. But Mike went out and priced new ones and said, maybe we can refurbish this one. So we'll spend about $10,000 and really bring it back up to where it needs to be. And we'll be able to get a few more years out of it. So we try to do our very best to be creative, to stretch things as far as we can on that. The total reserve expenditures for each year is an estimate just because of that flowing nature, but the list you have is the general list that we're anticipating. The asphalt job that we talked about in the prior meeting is in there as well. So that makes it a little high because it's about 3.6 million. So like, ooh, that's a lot. That's because of 1.1 of that is for the parking lot. As we track that, those adjustments, those are visible through your monthly financials. You can see, okay, hey, this is where we are on what we budgeted for reserves, and this is where we're actually at. We have never exceeded our reserve budget as long as I've been here each year, because either we delay things or the repair doesn't cost the full reserve amount as well.
Treasurer Duckworth?
Yeah, have you done any work on a future year reserve requirements? Not what the reserve study has said we should contribute, but have you done it on an actual project by project basis for 27, 28, 29?
Oh, yes. Our reserve study, if you're looking for a cure for insomnia, it's about 600 pages, and we have it 25, 26, 27. We have everything slated by year.
Okay, so I just haven't seen that.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, so the plan is to deplete the reserve budget by $1 million in 2027.
No. I understand what you're saying. The net result. The net result would be that, yes.
What will it look like in 2027 since I haven't seen the reserve study?
I don't have that number in front of me. Jen, do you have that number in front of you? But it anticipates this natural ebb and flow of it, because you're familiar with reserve studies, yeah.
It actually leads to a question I have is so I want to know more about this 2023 study because I keep hearing 2023 study and forgive me because I joined this year. I want to know what period of time this covers. So if it was, I'm assuming it was done in 2023, how far out does this study go?
Sure.
What is it called and where can I find it?
Oh,
Is it on?
absolutely. You guys are asking, this is like good reading material. Also, we'll make sure you get a copy of it. I won't print it out because that will kill a few trees, but we'll email it to you so you can see it. Like I said, there's one for Paseo and there's one for the ACC overall.
Any idea how far out it goes to what year?
30 years.
Okay.
30 years.
And Mark, were you asking for clarification on what the reserve study is for or called, you said?
I'm assuming that's all in there, but my question is, what is this document called?
Reserve study.
Reserve study. And then what year did it start? You said it goes out 30 years, and where can I find it?
It's on the website. We'll get it to you. We updated it, like I said, every 5 to 6 years. You're required to have one. And so that's the good times ahead. It's updated often, like I said, about every 5 or 6 years.
I guess the question that I was trying to ask was not what's in the reserve study for 2027 and 28, but what are we actually realistically looking to do? Are we looking to defer some things into 28, 29? Have we looked at it from a practical standpoint?
So from a cash flow perspective, we're not cutting it thin. If that's your question, like, are we going to be down? Are we going to be in the red? The answer is no, we're not. Because it's budgeted in a future year, and we're just pulling it forward. I can't give the exact year off the top of my head that we're pulling it from.
Can I speak up?
Yeah, please,
Reserve
Mike.
study, my division or my department, we do a lot of the reserve work. And one of the phenomenon that Aaron had already mentioned is that we do an investigative process. We examine it, we document it, photograph it. We actually create reports and turn them in for a reserve item that's called out for to be repaired. A large number of these items do not need to be done this year. So they get pushed to, we make a best guess judgment, or we take an engineer's advice, or we push it to the year that we believe it actually needs the work done. This will offset some of these surprises, like the parking lot for $1 million. Now, are we gonna push $1 million worth of work into the future to offset the parking lot? Probably not $1 million, but a lot. And that adds up, and it's a very dynamic document, and the calculation is very complicated because it goes out for 30 years, right? And it actually increases the value when you're projecting it out. So for all these little things, it's a constantly dynamic changing thing. But we do offset those costs by doing the right thing, by doing these reports. And you can ask Jen, we've been doing this for years. Stuff we don't do, we do reports on. This is its condition, and we push it forward. So hopefully it'll take some of that fear away.
2 more items I'll add. One is we have a $15 million balance. So we have a healthy cushion if someone were to be concerned about, what happens if there's a swing. Like I said, we've never exceeded the overall reserve budget for a given year. And I have complete confidence that we won't again. The other thing is we do a cash flow model instead of a percentage funded model. So it looks like you're familiar with that one as well. So, because in some HOAs they do a percentage, we don't do that. We just have too much to do a percentage. That reserve fund would be in the tens of millions of dollars, 40, 50 million bucks, and that's unnecessary.
So I'll just add to explain on this, because I just want to make sure everyone knows, just in case, and I know sometimes we nod our heads. When I first got on the board 9 years ago, I had no idea what people were talking about when they talked about a reserve study. So basically, they take an inventory of everything that's in the community, and it has an end date. It has an air conditioner, all the 30 AC units on the roof of the community center. Everything they'll say estimates, that'll last 15 years, that'll last 20 years. That's why it goes to 30. And they say, okay, well, when that dies, we're going to need $15,000 saved away. And so we started to fund that. And I don't know, when was it exactly that you guys fully funded the reserve study? Is there a date on that when was that yeah, when was it fully funded? Like,
It's not fully funded.
Was it never fully? Okay, I feel like it was fully funded for some strange reason. Okay.
We meet our cash flow requirement that we've created for ourselves to say, okay, we want to have this many times our annual projected reserve expense budget. And we've generally hovered around 2.5 to 3 times our annual reserve budget. So let's say we have 2.5 million, so that would be like 7.5 million. We've usually used 9 million as kind of that benchmark. And so we are past that $9 million mark.
Okay, perfect. So that's what the 600-page document would entail, is an itemized list of all the things, and you're going through it, and it says, okay, this is going to die then. So here we've got the money, and then it's a long process. So
Indeed. And Jen does a great job with it, and Mike's crew as well. So, additional question, I'm sorry.
other questions?
This is
Barb?
probably something I should know because we voted on the PVC to Poly. But why wasn't that ever part of our reserve items? And you
I'll let
probably
Mike
said
answer
it
this one.
once
This is,
before,
no, this is a really good answer because it's a really good question, and there's even more there that might scare you. So, Mike?
Okay, so excellent question, Barb. Thank you. The decision was made by the board and the finance director at the time to make the poly to PVC repairs operational in nature because they were adjustable. So if we had to spend a lot of money for poly to PVC repairs, it would come out of our operational budget. If we wanted to split it up, it becomes a lot more doable rather than making it a reserve. The other thing was that if we were to do the whole poly to PVC repairs that were suggested 3 years ago, it would have been $10 million plus 3 years ago. Again, that $10 million to set aside would have compound costs every year. So it would be costing us much more than 10 million now. So it was made to be both more flexible and not to make the reserve look underfunded. Does that make sense?
There's one more component to this is traditionally reserve studies do not include underground utilities.
that's what I wondered.
Yep.
Because it could have been something that was planned for a long time ago.
Could have been, yes.
Yeah, now I'm just curious, our air conditioners in the community center when we had all of them go out and all that, those are probably in the reserve study,
They are.
were planned for, just took a bit to do.
Correct. So this upcoming meeting, you'll have a bid award for that, for your consideration. But yes, the AC is in there, but the underground poly to PVC, all of our piping, sewer, electrical
Gear.
is not traditionally in a reserve study. Yes, yes. Right. It's just the way it was explained to me by our past reserve group, they said, it's difficult for an engineer to look at and assess the quality or condition of it, so they don't like to include it and say, yes. They like to say, we'll give you an allotment based on an estimate, because they don't want to put their neck out there too far. And so that will be something we'll be looking at as we do our next reserve study. Do we want to start to create an allotment for these things we know are going to come up?
And actually, Erin, if I can just, that is something that we did add into the 2023 study.
Did we do electrical as well? I know we did.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So, we did some of that with some of the block wall evaluations.
Mhm.
There were entries to repair block walls, but not any work to actually come out and evaluate them. Things like light poles and stuff like that too, the things that Mike's talking about with the electrical. That was actually thanks to Mike bringing that forward, that we did add. Now, it's not comprehensive because, again, you can't quantify it, but there is an allowance in there for that.
So 2 quick questions. One, I know reserve studies are very expensive and very timely, or time consuming, excuse me. What's our plan for the next update on the reserve study?
And what's your other question? Because I'll give you that one in just a second.
Second question, I'm still trying to get to our reserve anticipated expenses. So we're going to lose $1 million in reserve money in the 26 budget. What's our guess, and I'm using the term guess on purpose, for 2027? Will we deplete it another $1 million?
No,
What's the guess of what it will look
I
like?
don't have it in front of me. Jen can look it up. But I will say this, that is at the maximum. We have never hit that. So my guess is we're going to be less than $500,000 in the end. Will be less than $500,000 more. So we're not going to lose $1 million.
We'll gain 500,000 in the enhancement fund in 2027.
In reserve.
I'm sorry, reserve fund.
Reserve. So we won't lose that full $1 million. We'll only lose about $500,000. So we're not taking that full hit. Just as Mike explained, some projects ebb and
So
flow.
I get a scale of
Yeah.
what we're doing to that fund.
Yeah.
I guess, why are we guessing? So why do we not have a formula for that? I don't understand why
Sure,
we're saying we guess.
The only reason I say guess is because we have a list for 2027. It's in your packet. We'll talk through, we can talk through it if you want, but this list right here is what's slated for the reserve study for next year. So you have that right now. And at the top, yeah, it's 26. And so in 26, during the course of the year, we will go through and evaluate each one of these items. We'll do an inspection, we'll do a report, and we'll say, yes, this needs to be replaced. No, it doesn't need to be replaced. And if it does need to be replaced, that is an estimated cost for that. We don't know what it actually costs until when we actually bid it, right? So I can't say for certain this is exactly how much everything is going to cost because we haven't gone through that process yet next year. But that's what we do throughout the course of the year. Every day, Mike has a guy dedicated to this who goes through and we look at stuff, evaluate, and we say, okay, right here it says a sail shade is going to be X amount of dollars. We may not even need to do it. So we'd say push it into 27. Or we may say, hey, that sail shade, it's actually not that much. It's $5,000. Or that sail shade may be $7,000 and it's a little bit more. But that's kind of the ebb and flow nature of the reserve study. Like I said, in the end, we follow the total budget there. Just like we have a total budget as an organization, we don't go over that. We have a total budget for the reserve and we don't go over that. So that's why it's a little bit of an estimate game right now, because there are just so many pieces and it takes time to evaluate them and bid. Mike?
So Aaron, if I could just say too, just as a quick example, for 2025, we already have almost $300,000 worth of projects that we did not have to do this year that were slated for this year that are already going to be pushed forward, some to next year and some even 2 years out, because Mike's team has inspected and said these are great, no need to do anything to them.
We meet around this time of year and look at the next 3 to 5 years. So we just did this week, and you have the $3.6 million for next year. For 27, we're at 2.9 potential projects, and for 28, we're at 4.2. But those can all move when we sit and we look and we say, oh, this is for this cement box that's fine. We don't need to fix that cement box. And this is for this moldy, dilapidated thing. Let's move that up. So we have the numbers. Nobody's guessing. Like, this is a system that actually works really well.
Make sure you're using your microphone, Mike.
We're dealing with commodities, just like pork bellies or corn or soybean or fuel oil. The prices go up, they go down. It's an extremely complicated algorithm for calculating all this stuff. We are making our best estimations on how long the stuff's going to last, and we're planning out as far as we can, but it is a model, and model is not the reality, but we do really good with the model.
This is where I want to parlay a little bit into when we're going to update our reserve study next. So we're using Limble right now, which is a maintenance software package where we are inputting all of our assets into this software. Up to this point, it's been on an Excel spreadsheet, in filing cabinets, on a network drive, in folders. So this is a big step for us and will help us get a even more accurate inventory of what we have and where it is, because you can drop a pin in space. And then the work orders that are executed on said equipment are tracked to that asset as well. So this is a great step forward. I'll give credit where credit's due. Former board member Darren Frankham from the day I started, pushed and pushed and pushed for something like this. He says the ACC needs to do a better job of managing assets and planning for long-term costs. And Limble is a step in that direction. Reserve study. We had talked about doing a potential refresh this year or next. It's slated for 2028 for a full study. As we build Limble, I don't want to conflate trying to build Limble and doing the reserve study at the same time. I'd rather build Limble out, get all of our assets in there, and turn it over to the reserve specialist to look at in 2028. We're not in a cash crisis at all. We're cash flowing just fine on the reserve study, on the reserve fund right now. So I feel confident in giving them a really, really good inventory in 2028 and having them do that then.
When will everything be, when will Limble be up and running with all the information in it that we have to put in it?
Forever. I say that tongue in cheek, but I will say we have, how many assets do we have in there right now, Mike? Yeah, so
When is it, when do you have a projected, I understand that things are changing, we get a new air conditioner, things change, the list is dynamic, it's changing. When,
we would like to, probably by the end of next year, we would like to have a complete inventory of what we've got in there. So, because we haven't hired someone to do this. This is people doing it as other duties as assigned. And so there's not, if you want, we can add another person to the budget and assign someone to do it full-time. Mike's nodding his head, yes. We've had that conversation. I'm like, Mike, I can't do it. But we've survived this long. We're taking steps forward. We'll continue to do our best and get it filled in as fast as we can. But I will say the team from all of the departments and all of the buildings are doing a great job of inputting stuff. Stuff does get inputted consistently. We meet each week about it to keep it moving forward. So, any other questions on the reserve? Okay. Here's some major projects that we have coming up in the reserve fund since we just talked about this. Asphalt replacement, that's that 1.1. That was a pull forward. We just talked about that. On the schedule, so this is just scheduled program stuff at this point. The block wall evaluation repair, 362. Block painting, 183. Wrought iron painting, 469. And clearance at 65,000. Vehicles and equipment, we have a truck that could potentially be replaced at 32. 2 mules and a scissor lift there. Water park coping stones, it actually shouldn't say water park, that's my mistake. It should say lap pool coping stones. We're looking at replacing around the edge of that, and that's $81,000. There is only, I'm going to tell you right now, there is only one vendor in the United States who does this. One. You can ask Scott, you can ask Mike, there's only one guy who does it. And he wants a 6 to 12 month lead time. And we've looked at converting our system to a different system, and it's even more expensive. So it's like, it is what it is with him. So it's not my favorite, but I'm warning you right now, this is one of those where it's like, there is one option we've got, and that's it. So, additionally, parks, facilities, and construction, their building is up for some kind of a remodel. There, some exterior paint, interior paint, and flooring. That's more of like a general remodel budget there of $67,000. I'm planting a seed right now. So as part of the next FMP process, I would like to discuss expanding the PF&C yard. It would allow us to hold more material. We could do more things. It would just be simply expanding that wall west towards the driveway into the southern part of the park right there. It's just rock right now. We could expand that out there and allow us to handle more in-house repairs versus contracting them out or just having people wait a really long time. So we could store material there, get better pricing, better equipment, things like that. Wall repairs that require engineering will still continue to be farmed out to a third party. We do not do wall repairs that require engineering right now. That's just a level of liability that we're not going to take on. So that's a little bit about the reserve fund there and a plug. Any questions on reserve or those large projects?
Sorry, I want to go back. I had actually had no idea what a pool coping stone was until I just Googled it. So you're saying that what's unique about the community center pool and the coping stones for that pool? Because I
I'm gonna let,
looked it up and it just looks like.
I'm gonna let Scott talk about this one.
Travertine tile or something like that. Is it because of the way the washing in on the pool side is?
Yeah, we were just talking about that. So those coping stones are a 25-year lifespan, just like everything has their estimated use of life, and we're in year 26. What we had done in the past was just budget to replace a couple as they would break, because they can break. Just like if you drop a really nice plate or something. So it has come up to do it as one big project because over the last 25 years, you can see like, oh, that's a 4-year-old and that's a 20-year-old. Like they don't all look in uniform anymore. So while some of it's safety, a lot of it's aesthetic. We could keep just replacing a few every year, but why we would do it as one big project is to just kind of pull that Band-Aid and refresh and start our clock over again.
Is it because the pool is an older pool, and then the model that we use is kind of out of date, so there's no current vendors that are local? Or anything
No,
like
this
that?
guy, Rimflow, has bought anyone that has made a company to compete. He either, pushes them out or he ends up buying them. He's the guy for the whole country. And that model's not out of date like Phoenix Swim Club. That was just rebuilt a few years ago. They use the same coping stones we do. It's a good product, but we've had them for going on 26
Like
years.
the coping king.
He is the coping king, yes, of Chicago.
It's like the donut king. You should watch that documentary. All right, sorry. I just wanted a little clarification on that. Thank you.
And the reason that we're doing lap pool, not water park, is the usage. So the lap pool is getting stepped on 365, where the water park is seasonal.
All right. Enhancement. So as we talked about previously, it's funded by 1/4% of the sales price for each resold property for 2026. For projects coming out of there, we're looking at $500,000. And that would be for Liberty Bell Splash Pad and Playground. That's what we've had budgeted there. Scope and budget for that project is ultimately TBD, but that 500,000 is what was put on the original FMP list. So that's what we've just pulled forward. And we will be talking about that in October and November. So that will be coming forward. Projects we're finishing out this year is the museum piece. We're finished in this building, but there will be some stuff you will see over in the community center, some banners, some additional monitors, information stations, the trophy case right there by the front door that kind of looks like the mishmash. That'll be cleaned up. We'll have a nice trophy area set aside for those. So the entrance will pop a lot more and recognize the heritage of the folks who have lived here and accomplished some great things in sports in our community as well. So that'll look really nice. The additional pickleball's going on right now. There is a new date. Mike, remind me of that date. Or Scott, what's the latest completion date?
As of Monday, completion would be after that weekend of October 25th, 26th, and we would look to do an opening ceremony maybe on November 1st. So depending on how everything works.
And then Dog Park Shade, that will be completed before the end of the year. And like I said, we will discuss Liberty Bell Splash Pad and Playground. October and November will be soliciting some resident feedback in the coming months for that as well. So any questions on the enhancement fund projects? Okay. Then finally, Anthem Way Foundation. This one I hope is a snoozer. It mirrors past years, both from a revenue and a spending pattern perspective. Our sources of revenue are paver donations, annual funding from the ACC, interest income, state grants, and we do get the occasional donation as well. The cost of goods sold is the paver engraving. We've gone to a minimum paver order in order to save. In the past, we did multiple paver orders throughout the course of the year, and now we're trying to get it to 100 because it saves us significantly on shipping, so that we can save the fund balance in the foundation there as well. Expenses, we have the AVM event for Veterans Day there, common area maintenance, and then general maintenance. The general maintenance, if I'm remembering correctly, Susan, let me just look that up so I don't misspeak here on this one. Because this comes up from time to time. The general maintenance is to polish the pillars twice a year. And then the common area maintenance is for the flowers. So the surround that are in those two beds right there. That's what those two items are. It's not for anything else. The ACC assumes all the landscaping costs, all the other maintenance costs there. So that's the Anthem Way Foundation. Any questions on that? Like I said, we will have a separate Anthem Way Foundation meeting in October for the Anthem Way Foundation board to approve the foundation budget.
I'm just curious, can we see a balance sheet?
Yes, we have a P&L in the,
I have the P&L.
okay, I'll get you the balance sheet then. Let me make a note there. Okay, so that concludes this very exciting activity tonight. Let me go back through and make sure that I heard what I think I heard, and then you can tell me if I misunderstood and what additional information you may need or require. So if I recall correctly, wrote it down. One is a variance report, understanding what's been spent to its fullest extent so far. We will have a future agenda item about sponsorship, specifically for the scoreboard. You want a copy of the 2023 reserve study, and then the Anthem Way Foundation balance sheet. And then I also promised to get you one other thing. What was that? Oh, the $513,000. Yeah, cost breakdown. Okay. Anything else we need to get you? This is one of those, if you want to adjust, turn the knobs or dials, it would be helpful for us right now to hear that so that we can start making adjustments. Because what I don't want to do is get to the October meeting and you say, I've been thinking about this for a long time. Can we adjust this? And then we're kind of on the spot. So if there's something that you would like to see, even if it's just an idea as part of the discussion for next meeting, please let us know so we can develop that for you.
I have a few things down here. I feel like expenses are up about the same amount as the proposed increase, and I understand merit increases, things have got expensive, and we want to keep good employees here and they need to be paid, so I'm not gonna ever question that part. Where I'm going with this is that we had a 4% increase last year. We have a 3.75% increase this year, and I might have got those percentages off slightly. I want to know, did you challenge your staff to cut their divisions by the same percentage? So whatever the different divisions are within Anthem, so have you challenged them with their individual budgets to say, show me where you could save 3%, show me where you could save 4%, or maybe even half the proposed. If we're proposing 3.75, challenge them to show you where you could save 2 to 3%, and maybe we can take this down or eat into it somewhere else. So that's one.
Okay.
I'd like to know over the last 3 years, because I don't feel like 2 would do it justice. I want to see any consistent division that's over budget in the last 3 years. So basically, at the end of the last 3 years, for each individual division, who's been over budget? And have any of them been consistent? Is one division been consistently over budget? And the same for under budget. So same report, who's constantly under budget? And what the names of these areas or divisions are.
So what I would say is there has to be an acceptable margin of error. Like if someone's at 99% of their budget or 101, I consider that on budget. Even at 95%, I consider them on budget because I don't want to cut it that thin. And I would even consider 105% over on budget given the set of circumstances that are going on.
I would agree with that. And
Okay.
What I'm saying, that's okay. I'm not looking to compare it. Are you 100% this year and 150% the next year? But if it's around about the same amount, I want to digest that information and see that, but over and under, same way. And the last one, have we considered slowing the poly to PVC project? I know we're doing it in waves, and we're talking about, hey, if we put this off too long, it could get more expensive later, but it is an expensive project.
So we did. So Mike did slow it down. How much did you cut out of poly to PVC, Mike, this year? How much did you slow it down by? Right. So to you, this point right here, I mean, I kind of circle back on the original point of, yes, we do. We challenge, we push. I will say in this draft, you don't see that as clearly as if you were to look at the draft we have today. Because we had to get it put together for the meeting. And like I said, I applaud Jen for pulling it together. But we have continued to push and prod and tighten up numbers. So Scott and Steve can attest to that.
You and your staff did great. It's great information that you brought forward. It's nothing, I think we just need a little bit. I know I need just a little bit more information. I know you'll have that by the next meeting, but don't get me wrong. Everybody did great.
We have a nice worksheet that I'll make sure we have for our September meeting that will give you that information.
Kind of off of what Mark was saying, and just with regard to the variance, and he's asking for those divisions who are under budget, who are over budget. I've seen environments where their cost centers have a budget, and when they approach the end of the fiscal year, they have a certain amount of budget remaining, and they scramble to find something to spend the budget on. And so I believe Mark's kind of alluding to that a little bit. I'm alluding to that a little bit. I think when we are consistently being met with an increased due, he's referring to, and I think a lot of people think, are we doing everything that we can, or are we scrambling to spend the money under our budget to hit that max because we want to make sure that the money goes to our division, right? So I've seen scenarios, even in public education, where they've got money left over and then they scramble and they buy a $45,000 robot doll to talk to a kid, right? So it's like, so just a story. So that's, I think, kind of what we're generally alluding to.
Okay.
Dave, sorry.
Say if we're doing that, if anyone is doing that, they should be.
Agreed. So I will just say we don't do that. I understand that practice. I come from the public sector where that was a more common practice for some and not as common for others, but there were definitely those employees who worked there who did do that. But I will say we do not do that. You can track it through our finances and see we don't have these giant spikes in November and December. We try to use it when we budget for it. That's why I like the model we use here. Instead of the divide by 12, we say we're gonna have these expenses in June and August, and you can see if people are doing it on time or not. Sometimes stuff comes up, but generally people do things in the month they say they're gonna do it, and you can follow that line of, how come office supplies spiked by 6,000% in December? Did you go out and get everyone new office chairs or what? So I'm familiar with the practice, but I can say with confidence that's not something we do here, but I can also provide you that information so you can see that that's not what we do here.
Perfect. Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments by the board? Nothing? Okay, great. Can turn it over to public comment. Anyone here? Jerry, got anything for us? No? I know what you want. Okay. With that being said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.